One opening in chess that almost every single player struggles against is the London system. Here in this game I'll be showing you how to beat the London, how to put positional pressure on them by showing you one of my own games that I recently played. This is a classical game, so very long and over the board as well, so I could see my opponent and also played on a real chessboard at an event. So obviously a very serious game, no online game here. So my opponent opens with d4 and we see the London system comes out on the board. My chosen defense is the King's Indian, and this gives me some great winning chances. And even though London is very positionally solid, I find a way to put some serious pressure on my opponent early on by sort of knowing the structure better than him, because even though I'd never faced London before in an over the board game, I had played this a lot online, so I was quite familiar. And I even know here, putting the bishop on d3 is a little bit of a mistake here, because that bishop can become loose. So he goes to knight here, and if he decides to play a move like c3 later on, you notice that bishop actually becomes undefended. So c3 is a very classic blunder here. So I bring a knight into the game, and here my opponent just decides to castle. He thought a long time here, and I was kind of thinking, well, why does he need to think so long? You're literally playing a London system. System is in the name. But after the game, of course, I analysed with my opponent, and he said he was actually considering long castles. Maybe a setup like queen to e2 and castling long. But I just think when the pawn's committed to e3, it's a lot harder to trade off this dark squared bishop because, of course, the queen and the bishop cannot connect by a square like d2. A setup that I quite struggled against. I think I'm getting better at playing against it. It's just when white quickly tries to trade off my dark squared bishop, it just goes to attack with like h4, h5, break open my king and try and mate me. But here my opponent takes a more positional approach. He just castles, which leads me to sort of a dilemma. How am I going to play this? Well, a key to chess in general is pawn breaks, and here in the King's Indian there's two main pawn breaks you always go for, and two you can even play against the London system. c5 and e5, both trying to break open the center and trying to activate this dark squared bishop, which is currently kind of sleeping and biting on granite in the middle of the board. So I actually play this weird looking move, queen to e8, and in fact it's actually the best move, surprisingly enough. And you might be thinking, well, what's the idea here? You're just moving a queen one square for seemingly no reason. Well, the main idea is that after I push e5, which is the break I'm going for, if he decides to move his bishop to pin my knight, well, the knight's not going to be pinned. The queen is no longer on d8, and the queen also supports the e5 advance. Because obviously if you go with the rook, then the knight can get pinned, and also maybe I want the rook to be behind the f-pawn for pushing it in future. So my opponent goes bishop to g3, preempting the move of my e-pawn. I think a better move here would have been something like h3. This is very classic in London system, so the bishop can actually hide away on h2, which we do see is sort of a theme in this game. It hurts my opponent. So bishop to g3 played. I continue with my plan, and instead of capturing, he plays this move e4. A very usual way of playing is like captures, captures, and then white has the option to even play something like e4 here, that you can continue very standardly, or you can actually take with a knight, and the position with is a bit more dynamic, but some trades can happen here, and again, you're just gonna have to play chess, basically. But that didn't happen. My opponent played the move e4, which in fact I'd never seen before. My opponent confessed after the game he'd never played against King's Indian setup against London before, so we were sort of both in unknown territory, especially after this move. But I find the best ways to continue capturing this pawn on d4. Now this is a very important move in two ways. It clarifies the center, so of course I'm opening up my queen, and I'm also taking some control back in the center of the board. So right now my position is sort of spring-loaded to come forward, and I'm enabling that. And key, also I'm opening my dark squared bishop. Of course the knight's blocking it, but I can move that out of the way, and maybe I've got some pressure on the long diagonal, which in fact we do see in this game. So here we capture with the knight, very logically. I don't find the best plan here. I should have just gone knight to c5. I do a pretty similar move. I just want to take that dark squared bishop. Because if I can have my dark squared bishop as the only dark squared bishop in the position, a lot of dark squared bishop talk here, it's going to be very good for me. And we do see that in the game. We just see once I have complete control of the dark squares, I manage to dominate the game and it eventually ends up winning it for me. So he goes knight to b5, threatening to fork my pieces. Of course, I do not allow that. I have to shuffle the queen back, which looks like a weird move. It looks like I'm getting punished for playing the queen over, but here I can sort of argue the knight is in quite a weird spot. So I would say this hasn't benefited either of our positions really. He might have to move this knight back after a move like a6, and that might benefit me. So he goes knight to f3, rerouting. I decide to grab that bishop. He captures with the h-pawn. He had a choice. He just took towards the center, very logical. But the problem is this pawn on b2 is just hanging. So I grab that. He moves the rook and I come back. And now he goes rook to e1, trying to put some pressure in the center to maybe push this pawn to e5 in the future. I decided to go knight to e5. In hindsight, a bit of a weird looking move. Just causes some trades to happen. I think I thought I was achieving something here, but nothing really gets achieved. He manages to get tempo on my bishop, in fact, with f4. And now it's looking kind of scary, actually. I drop the bishop back. And now he's just got to move bishop to c4. And we can see my opponent's idea here. It's very clear. He wants to try and get his queen over, put some pressure here, take, and because my pawn is pinned, I'll have to take with the h-pawn, and maybe down the line it's going to get some serious pressure on my king, so I have to act fast and not allow that. So I play the move a6. The knight drops back into the middle. Of course, I could take that, but after a move like takes, I've given up my dark squared bishop, which you need to be very aware of this in the fianchetto structure, because this can get nasty. If he manages to land a pawn on f6, then his ideas of a checkmate down the line, the lobster pincer checkmate with the queen coming into g7 and delivering mate on that weak square. And also I could have back rank problems down the line because my king is a little bit open. And here I was thinking of a way to liberate my pieces. Obviously I don't want to trade. I wanted to play a move like c5 to kick the knight away, but I was thinking my d-pawn would end up quite weak. In fact, I was sort of seeing ghosts here. This isn't really a backward pawn. I can expand so quickly on the queen side, it doesn't really matter. And with these pawns being split, that's no small matter. Sometimes pawn structure matters, sometimes it doesn't matter so much, but here, it definitely is a factor, so I should have been more aware of that. Instead, I play a very weird looking move, queen to d7. But the idea is very clear. I want to play the move b5 to kick this bishop away, later c5, but I didn't want the knight to land in c6. You see, if I just go b5 right away, if I just play a move like b5, he actually has this weird looking move, knight to c7. I probably have to move the queen. I don't want to really go to e8, so I'll probably go to d7, and now he has a move bishop to, d5, and if I try and block, stop the pressure here, because obviously he's threatening to check and win my rook, but now he has this check anyway, and after I take, he takes here, and this just looks very uncomfortable. In fact, I'm losing the pawn on a5, the pawn to b5 will probably fall shortly after. So I just wanted to avoid all of this. That's why I played queen to d7 to control this important square, but a bit of a weird move. The engine actually suggested a much simpler solution, and that was to play the move c6 to control the square, and then continue with a very similar plan. But instead I play this move queen to c7. My opponent advances trying to attack me, but he missed a second idea of my move. Now I wasn't playing for tricks here, I just wanted to expand, but now I see there's two pieces here, and that dark squared bishop that I'd sort of prepared is uncontested now. You can see the control of the board is legendary, ripping open the center with a very strong diagonal. And this allows me to play the move queen to a4. My opponent had seen this. He just thought, okay, I'm fine after queen to d3, but no, I follow up b5, continuing with my plan, and we can see there's a bit of a skewer, a kebab on this middle of the board. These two pieces both can't be saved. He has to lose one of them, so he sacrifices the knight. I recapture, and now my opponent makes a bit of a grave mistake here. The game is sort of over, he's down a piece, but now he takes with the rook. This is not great for my opponent. He confessed after the game he missed this move. Happens to the best of us. I made some serious mistakes in this tournament as well. Of course, the move is bishop to a6, hitting the rook, and after queen to b3, just a few captures later, and the pawn structure is fixed. Of course, he doesn't want to lose that pawn, but I move my bishop to center of the board, controlling all these key squares. This is maybe the wooden shield, the Sakara would call it, a bishop outpost, quite nicely placed in the middle of the board, attacking this pawn. My opponent defends that pawn. Now I move to activate the rook. He moves the bishop here, and I attack the pawn. I attack the bishop. That wasn't the best square for the bishop to be on, and in this position, my opponent resigned the game. So yeah, a very good game by me, I would say. Putting some serious pressure on London's system and capitalizing on a little tactical error my opponent made. But one thing is, make no mistake, this, of course, was a much quicker way for my opponent to lose the game, but even after something more usual, even after, if he plays the correct way, moving the knight back, or I can't quite remember what the engine was suggesting, white is still under a lot of pressure here. I'm just going to roll these queenside pawns down the board and eventually create a pass pawn with this 3-on-2 on the queen side. So there you go. That's how you can put some pressure on the London system. Some tactical ideas for you there, some positional ideas, especially if you're a King's Indian player. Hopefully you guys learned something, and I'll see you guys in the next video.